Jack Thunder and the Fragments of Anima, Book 3, Darkness. Chapter 1, The End of Summer. Well, it looks like you've got a clean bill of health. There were no traces of null magic in your blood this time. Jack Thunder nearly jumped out of his seat in excitement. The wait was over. He was finally getting discharged from the hospital. Just in time, too. He had been in the hospital for over 2 weeks, restlessly waiting for his body to heal so that he could get back into the action. Now, not only had his shoulder healed and the null magic left his body, but the Dark Carnival was only 2 days away. Thank Anima! I was starting to think that I'd never get out of there. Thanks for healing me! The healer couldn't say another word before Jack Thunder bolted out the door. He didn't stop until he reached the lobby. He would have kept running, but something made him stop. It was a pamphlet on the side of the table in the waiting room with the words Dark Carnival emblazoned upon it. Looked like the person who had last read it forgot to take it with them. He did a bit of reading. It seemed like the Dark Carnival would be in the Nursery Rhyme District this year. Jack Thunder wasn't surprised. The rural area was home to many traditional but fun-loving earth fairies who are known for their autumnal celebrations. Definitely a place where the Dark Carnival could get some decent patronage. Best of all, it was only a small expanse of water away from where he was now. The storm gremlin snatched the pamphlet off the table before running outside. He could hardly stand another minute in this sterile place. Hey, Mr. San, they just let me out of the hospital! San whipped around. Sure enough, there was the storm gremlin of the hour. He was waving around a pamphlet. The Tengu could already guess what it was about. And wait till you hear this! The Dark Carnival is in the Nursery Rhyme District this year. That's not too far from where we are. I think it would be nice for us to take the load off for a while, huh? Actually, Jack, San interjected, I was just thinking about that myself. I talked to your sister. She was a bit reluctant, but I told her that it might be good for us. Wouldn't want you getting hurt again so soon after getting out of the hospital, no? No, we wouldn't want that. I talked to Buckthorn, too. She seemed really excited. Jack Thunder was getting a motor mouth again. San could tell he needed this. The kids just needed to unwind for a while. Besides, if Strombolia was still working at the carnival, there was a chance that the next anima fragment would be there. Maybe Strombolia went back to using lethal jokes for fireworks shows? San, I just finished packing up. We should be all ready to go as soon as we get Jackie out of... Frosti stopped when she saw her brother talking to the Tengu. Oh, I didn't know you were already out of the hospital. They let me out just now. Couldn't come soon enough. I'll bet, Frosti thought to herself. Did San already tell you what our plans were? Yeah. He said it might be good for us to go to the Dark Carnival. And he thinks that the Dark Fragment might be there. But we're only going for a couple days. We need to get back to our quest as soon as we can. Jack Thunder nodded. He completely understood. Can Buckthorn come along too? I promised her I'd bring her if we went. I have a feeling you and Buckthorn are going to be sticking together for a while, San replied. So this is your home, Jack? Buckthorn asked. Yep, been pretty much living here my whole life, Jack Thunder replied. So, guess all this is new for you, huh? Nah, not really. Even before I had the staff, I went on little adventures down on the surface. Gave Frosti a heart attack more times than I can even count. Jack Thunder chuckled to himself as he slipped his lunchbox into his knapsack. Ah, well, at least you've seen more of the world than I have. I don't think I've ever been far from the Great Barrier Kingdom. Not even to the Nursery Rhyme District? No, not once. Jack Thunder paused, shocked that Buckthorn had never even been to a place that was so close to where she lived. Guess it's lucky we're going then, huh? Yeah, I guess. Buckthorn was a bit worried about this new trip. Ever since their adventure in the Turquoise Archipelago, life had been moving very fast for her. One day, she was peacefully living out her life in the Turquoise Sea. The next, she was battling wendigos with a storm gremlin wielding a giant staff. Now she was hundreds of miles up in the air, helping him get ready for their next adventure in a strange new land. Well, not so strange for him, but definitely so for her. Is there something wrong? Oh, no, nothing's wrong. Buckthorn hoped Jack Thunder didn't notice the hesitancy in her voice. Ah, well, in any case, Jack Thunder tied up his knapsack and slung it across his back. I'm all ready to go. Have you got your things? Buckthorn nodded. Good. I guess now we just have to wait for San and Frosti to get ready. So the two sat on his bed, waiting. Neither one said anything for quite some time. Not that they needed to. Both were lost in thought. Finally, a voice called out from the other room. Jackie, we're ready. Come on out. The two followed the voice out of Jack Thunder's room. They were all set for their next big adventure. Chapter 2: The Carnival of Darkness. A rainbow materialized on the outskirts of the Nursery Rhyme District just as Jack Thunder, Frosti, San, Razor, and Buckthorn slid down it one by one. For someone who had never traveled by rainbow before, Buckthorn seemed to take to it like a duck to water. She landed on the ground somewhat roughly, but still on her feet. The same couldn't be said for San, though his arrival was a bit more graceful than last time. That is, if you count landing on your behind rather than on your face graceful. He grunted in exasperation as he got to his feet. The five dusted themselves off as they took in their new surroundings. The Nursery Rhyme District was beautiful at this time of year. Well, it was beautiful all year round, but autumn in the district was really special. This was the time of year when the leaves were painted in hues of sunset and flame. Not only that, but Jack Thunder could see that the farmhouses and some of the trees had been decked out in orange and purple lights. Yes, spooky season had definitely arrived in the Nursery Rhyme District. Jack Thunder could already see a few forest sprites and talking animals decked out in costumes. They were all headed in one direction. Though it was impossible to see far in the foliage, the storm gremlin figured they must be headed towards where the Dark Carnival was. He followed them into the temperate woods. After some time, the crew arrived at a small clearing surrounded by the autumn forest. Right in front of them they could see a chaotic mishmash of wooden carnival rides and attractions. These were decorated with even more lights in orange, purple, and lime green, just like the trees back in the district. Black banners bearing an overturned purple moon were strewn about the entire clearing. They had to be on every single tree, building, and attraction. No doubt about it, this was the Dark Carnival. The line was much longer than Jack Thunder would have thought by how many fairies he had seen in the Nursery Rhyme District. By the time the crew made their way to the ticket counter, the storm gremlin had just finished counting how many lights encircled the archway before them. It came out to about 146 if he didn't miss one. In fact, he was certain it was that number. He had counted them multiple times. As soon as he made his way to the ticket booth, the sprite running it noticed Stormbringer. Oh, that's a very nice staff you've got there, young man. Is that supposed to be Stormbringer? Jack Thunder had to resist rolling his eyes. He knew that replicas of Stormbringer existed, but how could the sprite not realize that this was the real deal? Actually, this is the real... Frosti put her hand on his shoulder. Jackie, it's not a big deal. Let's just get our tickets. The team got their tickets and made their way into the grounds. Even in the middle of the day, the Dark Carnival was shrouded in shadow, both from the trees surrounding it and from the plum sky above. The various rides and attractions looked to be formed from living trees that twisted into the shapes of roller coasters and carousels. Indeed, Jack Thunder could see that one coaster still had its bark and leaves clinging to its structure, illuminated by glowing fungi of many colors that grew on the surface.
Oh, nice hit there!
But that wasn't all. If you looked closely, you would notice a violet aura surrounding each and every single one of the attractions. Powerful dark magic gave them artificial life, enabling them to run even in the absence of a motor or any other mechanical equipment. Frosti spotted a black and white Nekomata near a tall redwood tree, talking to some harlequin gremlins, ash-skinned and dressed in pied jumpsuits of red and purple. She wasn't surprised. The two-tailed cat people regularly worked at the Dark Carnival. After all, none of the attractions would function if it weren't for the Dark Fairy's ability to breathe life into dead things, including dead wood, which all the rides were made from. Frosti wouldn't have even taken notice if she hadn't heard the tail end of the group's conversation. So, the master plan is going through? Yep, everything's all set up. Pretty soon, everyone in this carnival will get exactly what they paid for. I hope you're right. The Nekomata's third eye crystal, the moon-shaped magenta stone in the center of his forehead, flickered faintly. Exactly what they paid for? Frosti turned to San. Did you just hear that? I'm afraid I didn't. What's wrong? He asked her. Those harlequin gremlins over there were just talking to that Nekomata. That one gremlin said that everyone here would get exactly what they paid for. And by his tone, it doesn't sound like anything good. San grunted. Out of all times to have to deal with this again. Are you sure they weren't just talking about a performance? Well, Frosti hesitated. No, but it just seems like with all that's happened, the wendigos keep popping up again and again. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, I don't know. Wait a minute. Where did those two go? Sure enough, Jack Thunder and Buckthorn were nowhere to be found. Seriously, Jackie? You just run off and don't say anything? I'm sure they'll be fine, San reassured her. They're not little kids anymore. Besides, they've got their fragments with them. I'm sure they'll be fine. He was right. At least for now, they could handle themselves. Frosti was more interested in that Nekomata. What was he planning? What were they planning? Jack Thunder stared up at the stuffed dragon hanging just above him, determined. He had promised Buckthorn he would win something for her, and that little dragon was just the perfect thing. All he had to do was knock over the bottles in the center of the stage. He gave the attendant, a gray tabby Nekomata with yellow eyes and an amber third eye crystal, 3 coins. The attendant handed him 5 balls. Razor leapt up on the counter as Jack Thunder took aim. Jack Thunder's first throw missed by nearly a foot, but with every throw his aim got better and better, until he threw the very last ball. It struck the stack of bottles head-on and the tower collapsed. Or at least it was supposed to collapse. Instead, the ball bounced off the stack and fell to the floor. It was as if the bottles were glued to the table in front of him. Seriously? I just saw the ball hit them. But you didn't knock them over now, did you? The attendant replied, not bothering to look up from his magazine. Razor snorted beside the storm gremlin. Another Nekomata with orange tabby fur, celadon green eyes, and an amethyst third eye crystal passed through and caught wind of their conversation. Hey kid, he's ripping you off. You'd be better off taking your money elsewhere. Hey, who do you think you are taking business away from me? The attendant yelled at the orange Nekomata. He threw down his magazine and stood up to face the orange cat man. And who are you to be ripping people off? Hey, we're at a carnival. What do you expect? Expect better than this. I ought to scratch your ears off right here and now. I'd like to see you try. Jack Thunder and Razor ran from the booth. Neither one of them wanted to see the cat fight that was about to go down. Jack Thunder sighed. So much for that. So he wasn't going to get Buckthorn anything from the games here. Maybe he should check out the shops? That sounded like a good idea. He made his way around the giant circus tent that rested in the center of the grounds. It was black and purple, the colors of the dark element. Jack Thunder remembered how his book said that one of the 6 champions of Alterus, the Great Strombolio, had come from the Circus of Shadows. Jack Thunder got another idea. If Strombolio was here, the Storm Gremlin was definitely set on getting his autograph. Maybe he could get one for Buckthorn too. She might like that. He continued to circle the tent until he got to the entrance. There was a sign near the door listing performances. He didn't see Strombolio's name right offhand, but he did see that there was going to be a meet and greet after the last performance in about 2 hours. Jack Thunder smiled. He could try and get the Harlequin Gremlin's autograph then. And if not, well, there were still plenty of shops around the carnival. As he and Razor walked away to the shopping section of the grounds, neither noticed a group of Harlequin Gremlins mulling about near the tent, eyes locked on the staff tied to the Storm Gremlin's back. Chapter 3: Fame and Misfortune. Buckthorn didn't even know where to start. There were so many things to do here. The smell of cinnamon, apples, and pumpkins was so thick in the air that it gave her a headache. She had never been on land much, and she certainly had never tried these fall fruits and spices before. Most sirens adhered to a carnivorous diet, subsisting mainly on fish. Even those who included plants in their diets had only access to various sea vegetables. Nothing like the brightly colored and pungent fruits she was smelling now. She spotted a cluster of caramel apples on the counter of a stall giving out free samples. Maybe they actually taste really good. She took one that was covered in crushed almonds and took a bite out of it. Apples and caramel don't taste the same for someone who can't taste sweets, and Buckthorn, being a siren, certainly couldn't. Instead, all she got was a bitter, sour, gooey mess. She gagged in disgust and threw the rest of it in the trash. People actually ate these? It made no sense to her. Another building caught her eye. It was rather small and covered in wilted ivy. The sign hanging from it read, "Summer's End Fortunes." A fortune teller? This might be a lark. Buckthorn walked through a curtain of beads to the inside of the building. It was dark and quiet inside, with the only light coming from a scant few candles on the table in the center of the room. Well, that and the sapphire eyes and pale blue forehead crystal of the Necomata sitting across from her. From the little the reef siren saw, the room was decked out in velvet curtains in shades of violet and red. "Ah, I see you've come to see me. Please sit down." Buckthorn did as she was told. She sat down across from the Necomata. As soon as she did, another source of light filled the room, painting it lavender. Images of stars and planets danced across the walls. "What have you come in here to know?" Buckthorn thought. "I want to know what Jack Thunder's up to right now," she finally requested. "Ah, is that the one in the green jumpsuit? I saw him pass by here not too long ago. Quite the funny little character." The Necomata concentrated, focusing on the glowing lavender sphere between them. Her forehead crystal brightened as an image began to take form within the sphere. Buckthorn couldn't see much, but she could make out various black shapes appearing and disappearing within it. Were these wendigos? "Oh no, it seems like you and your friend are in terrible danger. Dark, evil things are happening at this very carnival. I sense a cold emptiness falling over the Circus of Shadows. A storm is coming." "A cold emptiness? So the wendigos are here?" "I cannot say. All I know is what I can feel. I would seek out this Jack Thunder. The staff he wields holds the key to defeating this threat. I sense a great power coming from your necklace, too. Tell me, is that the sea stone? Buckthorn froze. Yeah, we're kind of on a mission, but we stopped here to take a day off. Yes, indeed. But in all this darkness, I sense a spark of hope. A powerful source of dark magic, deep within the circus tent. Seek it out, and you shall have the key to saving the carnival. Buckthorn thanked the Nekomata, giving her a handful of coins. As she left the building, she thought about what the fortune teller had said. A shadow falling over the Dark Carnival. A powerful source of dark magic. What could it all mean? She would have to ask Jack Thunder when they found each other again. The tuxedo-furred Nekomata disappeared into the circus tent. He had been worried about someone hearing him when he was out and about, but he'd never suspect someone was on his trail in here. That's why he never noticed Frosti and San ducked behind a stack of crates in the ring. He slung the bag full of tools off his shoulder and called out, "All right, I'm back. You can show yourself now." A mysterious figure emerged from the darkness. Frosti could see that the figure wore a red and gray cloak that obscured their entire body. There was no telling who or what this being was. "Good, good," they replied in a harsh, broken voice that sounded like radio static. "This will be perfect for our master plan." The mysterious entity sifted through various scrolls that were in the Nekomata's bag. Cut to the chase. What is it that you needed these for? "You'll see in due time," the figure replied. "By the time we're done with this carnival, everyone here will have seen the show of a lifetime." The Nekomata let out a deep sigh. "I hope you're right. Anima knows we need it after the decline we've seen in attendance these past few years." "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" San swore he could hear the figure snicker under their breath. And that voice, that was the voice of a wendigo. That Nekomata was conspiring with a wendigo. But why? He and Frosti waited until the figure left. Then, as soon as the Nekomata made his way to the exit, Frosti froze his feet in place with a beam of ice magic. She and San surrounded him. "All right, bud. What is this that you're hiding from us?" Jack Thunder poked his nose into the tent, razor perched on his shoulder. He knew he wasn't supposed to be here. The show wasn't supposed to start for another hour. Not like that was going to stop him, though. He had a mission. He was going to get 2 autographs from the great Strombolio himself. One for him and one for his friend. This way he could avoid the crowds. He was sure that once Strombolio saw Stormbringer on his back, the Dark Champion would gladly do it. Certainly he would do it for one of his biggest fans. The Storm Gremlin was so wrapped up in his own thoughts that he didn't notice the Nekomata rushing towards him until it was too late. The two collided, landing in a heap. Jack Thunder untangled himself from the heap. "Seriously? What's the big idea?" The Nekomata brushed himself off. "Ah, please forgive me. Those 2 are after me." He gestured down the hall. "Who's after you?" "A storm gremlin, Fifinella, and an old Tengu. The Fifinella froze my feet in place and they surrounded me. I managed to break away, but I think they're still chasing me." "Oh," Jack Thunder realized. "That sounds like Frosti and San. They must have come inside the tent with me." "You what?" the Nekomata blurted out. All of a sudden, a blue beam of ice narrowly missed his head. "Jackie, what are you doing with that Nekomata? Did he hurt you?" Yep, this was definitely Frosti. "Wait a minute, why are you trying to freeze him?" Another blast of cold energy froze the Nekomata in place once again, this time from the chest down. "Oh great," he grumbled as he fell over onto his front. "Ha! You won't get away from us again," Frosti exclaimed. Hey, what was that all about?" "Don't worry, Jackie. He won't hurt you." That's not what I asked. What did he do to you? He's conspiring with the wendigos. I saw. Wendigos? I didn't sense any wendigos when we were here. Maybe you're just being paranoid. I'm paranoid? I'm paranoid? I'm the only one who's taking this mission seriously. By torturing an innocent Nekomata? Stop it! Stop it, both of you! Both storm gremlins snapped out of their argument to see San fuming. Neither one had ever seen the Tengu this angry before, nor could they have ever dreamed that such a sound could come out of a weathered, frail body such as his. He glowered at the two of them. Yelling at each other isn't helpful right now. We need to figure out what's going on here. Jack, we think that this Nekomata here knows something about the Wendigo invasion here. We wanted to ask him a few questions. Frosti may have come off a bit too intense, but we don't mean him any harm. Jack Thunder and Razor nodded simultaneously. When San explained it, it made a bit more sense. He kneeled down to the Nekomata's level. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to know what's going on. He unsheathed Stormbringer from his back and showed it to the Nekomata. This here is Stormbringer, the Fragment of Air. We're on a mission to find the Fragments of Anima before the Heart of Darkness returns to Alterus. We don't mean any harm, but you need to help us help you. Tell us what you know. Chapter 4. Presenting Shadow Paws. The Nekomata was silent for a good moment. Finally, he spoke. The Circus of Shadows has been struggling ever since the War of the Wendigos. People don't have as much money, especially in places like the Nursery Rhyme District. We thought we'd have to close down. But then this figure came in and promised to bring our numbers back up again. Don't know what he's been doing, but the Dark Carnival is bigger this year than it has been for the past few years. I've tried to ask him many times what he's been doing, but he always brushes me off. Was that the figure you were talking to earlier? Jack Thunder asked. Yes. Jack Thunder could see Frosti fume. Icy sparks flew around her fingertips. Anima knew what she was thinking. Not that he was in a much better mood. He had just wanted to have some fun, but now he had to deal with this again? At the Dark Carnival of all places? He looked down at Stormbringer, which had begun pulsing. Ugh, figures. That's when he remembered. Strombolio. He had to talk to Strombolio. The Dark Champion would know what to do. But did he still work at the Circus of Shadows? He asked the Nekomata. Oh, Strombolio never stopped working here. He's the one in charge. But I don't know if even he really knows what's going on. Where is he now? The Nekomata's gaze shifted around. Where was he? He should be here in about an hour or so. At least that's when they started preparing for their next show. He thought to where the Harlequin gremlin could be. He's usually in his trailer at this time of day. He's set to arrive about an hour before the show starts. You should be able to find it just around the back of the tent. Jack Thunder nodded. He shot Frosti a look. She glared back but unfroze the Nekomata, releasing him from his icy prison. He stretched out his arms and legs before getting on his feet. He faced the storm gremlin who had rescued him. Thank you. How can I repay you? I want you to lead the way. You can help us find Strombolio and get to the bottom of whatever's going on. Jack Thunder realized something. You can also tell us your name. Shadow Pawsworth. But most people call me Shadow Paws. Buckthorn couldn't stop thinking about what the fortune teller had told her. She had seemed really desperate, like there was something she needed to say but couldn't. The reef siren remembered how she had mentioned a powerful source of dark magic inside the circus tent. Could that be the dark fragment? Only one way to find out. She made her way towards the entrance of the circus tent. As she was approaching, she could see the rest of the team come out one by one. But there was someone else with them too. A black and white Nekomata she'd never seen before. He followed close behind Jack Thunder with a nervous expression. "Oh, there you guys are." She ran up to Jack Thunder. "I just went to this fortune teller, and she told me there was a powerful source of dark magic in the circus tent. Have you found anything in there?" Jack Thunder shook his head and rolled his eyes. "I hardly even got through the door. Anyway, this is Shadowpaws. He's helping us find Strombolio." "Strombolio? As in the Great Strombolio?" she exclaimed. She may have lived under a sea rock, but everyone in Alterus had heard of the 6 champions. And one of them was here? Yep, you'd better tag along. We need all the help we can get. Buckthorn followed Jack Thunder and the crew into the thicket of trees beyond the bounds of the carnival. They trailed behind Shadowpaws deep into the forest. There was hardly anything here except black trees with even blacker leaves clinging to their branches, scraping against a maroon sky. The ground beneath them crunched with dead leaves and frost. Buckthorn shivered. She didn't expect it to be so cold at this time of year. Her scales were no match for the frigid wind that sliced through the trees. She was a reef siren after all, not a polar siren. Eventually, she could see a faint red light in the brush. Getting closer, she realized what she was looking at. The light was attached to a massive wooden trailer. On the side of the trailer was the symbol of the Circus of Shadows, an overturned crescent moon bordered in stars and smoky shapes. Buckthorn could make out TH above the symbol. Jack Thunder held Stormbringer up to the side. The green light from the staff illuminated the entire text. The Great Strombolio. This was it, all right. Shadowpaws rapped on the door 3 times. From inside, a deep voice answered, "Just a minute, I'm almost ready." They stared at the door for a long time. All of a sudden, the knob clicked and the door opened. Sure enough, this was Strombolio. San could tell. He looked a bit older than the Tengu remembered, but everything else was still there. He still wore the same black and purple harlequin outfit that he had in those days. His gray skin was weathered, and his right antenna had a notch in it, but his coppery red eyes still held that same glimmer of mischief San had seen all those years ago. Except now that gleam had dimmed somehow? As soon as the harlequin gremlin saw San, those eyes lit right up. "Ah, San, how's it been going since the war? Haven't seen you in a while." "Strombolio, it's good to see you again." Strombolio caught sight of Shadowpaws. "Oh? Shadowpaws? What brings you here? Aren't you supposed to be preparing for the show?" Jack Thunder stepped in. "That's not important right now. There's something going on at the carnival. We need your help." Strombolio noticed the staff in Jack Thunder's hand and the pendant Buckthorn was wearing. He froze in disbelief. Are those?" San nodded curtly. "We found Shadowpaws speaking to a strange figure. Do you know anything about this?" "Oh, I think that I know what you're talking about. His name is Nemesis. He offered to help us out when we were struggling. He's helped us out a lot, actually." "What do you know about him?" Frosti asked somewhat sharply. "He seemed really suspicious to us." Strombolio's face dropped. Not much, really. I've been so busy with the carnival and all that I didn't really question it. Maybe he should have." "Do you know where the dark fragment is? Is it in here?" San asked. "No, it's not in here. It's with the rest of the circus. I still use it for fireworks shows." Frosti and San exchanged worried looks. If Lethal Joke was still in the tent, the wendigos could have already gotten to it, especially if Nemesis was still in there. "Come on, I can show you where I keep it." Strombolio gestured for them to follow him. Interlude 1. The creation of lethal joke. Strombolio could hear the sounds of crickets just outside his window. He checked the clock. 1/4 till midnight. Most of the world was fast asleep. But he and his fellow Harlequin gremlins were different. They slept all day and worked and played all night. And right now, Strombolio was working very hard. He glanced back over at the pile of metal scraps by the door. They were too far gone for the carnival rides they once came from. They were burnt and scarred to the point of oblivion. But he could fix them. He would fix them right up and make them into something completely new. He picked up his wrench and got to work. Piece by piece, he constructed something new. A scrap here, a bolt there. He worked throughout the night. Finally, it was done. He wiped the sweat off his brow. What sat in front of him was entirely different. It looked like a huge handheld cannon, its long barrel painted pink and purple. On the side was an image of a cartoon face, grinning mischievously. He slung it over his shoulder. It worked just the same as any other gun. He pulled the trigger and it fired. Puffs of green and pink smoke billowed from the cannon, but nothing came out. No projectiles had been put in it yet. But at least he knew it worked. Perfect. Now, if he could test it out with some fireworks... Strombolio made his way outside. Beside his caravan was a basket of freshly made fireworks. He grabbed one of them and jammed it into the barrel of his creation. Aiming it at the sky, he trembled with anticipation. Here was the moment of truth. As soon as he pulled the trigger, the young Harlequin gremlin was blown off his feet. Unfazed, he wrangled himself into a sitting position. The firework flew some distance through the air before it exploded in a shower of orange and purple sparks. As it disappeared, the sounds of the forest once again filled his ears. A wide smile spread across his face. It worked! It really worked! Strombolio, what's going on out here? Is everything all right? He turned around to see his ringmaster behind him. The older Harlequin gremlin's face held a look halfway between annoyance and concern. Strombolio's antennae drooped slightly. Sorry, sir, I was just testing out this new thing I made for the circus. The ringmaster cocked his head. A new thing? Can you show me how it works? Strombolio obliged. He put another firework in the cannon's barrel. He braced himself against a tree so he wouldn't fall backwards again, and fired it at the sky. The fireworks shot out and burst into a shower of blue sparks. Wow, you did all this? Strombolio nodded. The ringmaster gave him a pat on the head. I admit I was a bit cross when I came out here, but you've gone and done it again. I knew there was a reason I made you the main performer in my circus. Proud as Strombolio was, he didn't know the half of how important his little art project would be in the coming years. Chapter 5. Carnival of Despair. Strombolio led the way through the foliage, Shadow Paws close behind him. It was already pretty cold when they came out here, but Buckthorn could swear that it was colder than before. It wasn't because of the wind either. In fact, the wind that had whispered through the tree branches above them before had grown silent. She turned her gaze up to the sky. It was still purple, but now it looked closer to slate than plum. Probably just my imagination, she thought to herself. She wanted to believe that. But wasn't this how the Turquoise Islands were before she and Jack Thunder faced down the Wendigos? She shook her head and groaned. All I need now is for it to start snowing. She and the rest of the team saw nothing else unusual about the forest. Not like they could see much in this gloom anyway. They stepped wherever Strombolio stepped. Slowly but surely, they made their way through the forest. Buckthorn could feel a vibration against her chest. She looked down. The sea stone was glowing a teal blue and pulsing at a steady rate. Wasn't this what Stormbringer did whenever it sensed the Wendigo's presence? Hey, is the sea stone pulsing too? She noticed Jack Thunder looking at her. Sure enough, Stormbringer was pulsing at the same rate as her necklace, just like it did when they were surrounded by Wendigo-possessed fairies back on the Turquoise Islands. A wave of anxiety washed over her. She didn't know how long it had been, but if the fragments could sense the Wendigos even at this distance, then they had worked much faster than Buckthorn had feared. What if they already took over the carnival? She snapped out of it when she noticed that Strombolio had stopped moving. He and Shadowpaws were standing at the edge of the forest, staring into the clearing. The rest of the team went up beside them to see what was going on. They were back at the carnival, but this wasn't the carnival they remembered. Jack Thunder could have mistaken it for deserted carnival grounds. What you would see when the fun was over and it was time for everyone to pack up and move on. The rides and structures were still present and intact, but there was no one operating them. They sat as desolate and empty as discarded pupa shells. Even the bright summer's end lights that adorned them had traded their vibrant colors for varying shades of gray. They still glowed dimly in the low light. The rest of the carnival fared no better. All around them, from the rides to the trees to the ground itself, the land had been sapped of all color. Where there were once the fair's bright hues, there were now bleached white surfaces. Jack Thunder would have said that winter arrived early in the Nursery Rhyme District, but this was no winter. No natural winter, anyway. The team stepped out of the brush and into the former carnival grounds. It provided no relief from the cold, and the wind still hadn't blown. It would have been completely silent were it not for the thrumming from the anima fragments in Jack Thunder and Buckthorn's possession and the crunch of the ground beneath them. Jack Thunder shivered. The place was obviously anima depleted. And it happened so fast. How long were they out in the woods for? I don't get it. It was fine just a few minutes ago. How did it get this bad this fast? Shadowpaws almost shouted in confusion. Jack Thunder turned to the Nekomata. It was like this on Tempest Island, too. When the Wendigo attacked, I left the village for a few minutes, and when I came back, it was completely drained. Wendigos work very fast. Jack is right, San added. Figures that they would lure their prey into a false sense of security first. Razor leapt off of Jack Thunder's shoulder and began sniffing the ground. What is it, Razor? What do you smell? Jack Thunder asked. The wyvern didn't answer. He just kept sniffing, making his way towards one of the roller coasters. He stopped in front of the sign at the entrance. It read, "The Wood Dragon," in faded red letters. He whined. San could feel something was off about the coaster. He looked closer at the rails. Normally, they would glow with a soft, warm magenta aura, the color of Nekomata magic. But these rails' aura was very dark, even darker than the darkest of dark magic, almost black, and it gave off a deep red gleam. Even worse was the chill surrounding them. There was no mistaking what this was. Before he could say anything, though, the entire coaster jolted with a clash and a bang. He jumped back as it sprung to life before his very eyes, shifting, transforming into something new. Rails became claws and wings and a tail. The end split off and twisted upon itself, forming a snout. One by one, the beast pulled its claws out of the ground. Its entire form was made from the structure of the former roller coaster. Its body was warped and twisted roots and the trunks of trees. Dry, cracked bark formed its scales, and patches of the glow fungi Jack Thunder saw earlier drew profane runes across its entire body. Its claws were tree roots, and its wings were covered in leaves. The wooden dragon glowered down at them with glowing red eyes. Jack Thunder gulped, but readied himself nonetheless. Here we go. Chapter 6. The Wicked Wood Dragon. Jack Thunder charged up his staff, but the draconian construct ran straight at him, bowling him over. He barely managed to avoid the wood dragon's claws as he zapped it on its underside. The bolt left a black mark where it landed. The dragon whirled around to charge at him again, but Buckthorn summoned a tidal wave with the sea stone, knocking it over. It writhed and thrashed for a while before righting itself back on its feet. San took to the skies, swooping around the dragon and striking it from every angle. The corrupted coaster whirled around, but San evaded it every time it tried to strike. Strombolio ran up and jumped onto the wood dragon's back. Though the Harlequin gremlin didn't have lethal joke, he didn't need the dark fragment to be a menace in battle. He crawled all over the dragon's form, ripping out roots and branches with his pointed teeth. It screeched and bucked, trying to throw him off, but Strombolio just grabbed on even tighter. Eventually, he ate a hole in the construct's left flank and crawled inside. Shadowpaw shrieked when he saw the wall of twisted roots close around Strombolio. Had the wood dragon swallowed him? The maleficent roller coaster let out a victorious roar. It seemed like the former Dark Champion was done for. But not for long. All of a sudden, the wood dragon jerked. It fell on its side once again, its movements sporadic and chaotic. Its legs flailed helplessly, as if it were trying to flee. Its confused and anguished roars filled the air. Jack Thunder and the crew stopped and backed away. What was going on? Just then, Strombolio burst from the draconic golem's chest, covered in tree sap and dead leaves. The wood dragon seized one last time before falling limp. Its eyes faded to black, and the crew could see the red and black aura evaporating off of its form and dissipating. Strombolio crawled out and ambled to San's side. He glanced back at the now inactive wood dragon. The coaster was still twisted into a dragon's body, only now it had a massive hole in the middle of its chest. Wispy smoke rose off of its prone form. He sighed. Well, that was expensive. How am I supposed to explain this to the insurance company? How did you... He turned his head to see Shadowpaw stammering at him. I thought you were a goner for sure. Don't insult me like that. It was all just one of my acts. He gave the Nekomata a reassuring half-grin. Oh, of course. Shadowpaw's head dropped. Don't worry about me, kid. I faced up to the devil himself back in my day. Don't think I can't handle a paltry little dragon. His face fell. But whoever did this to my property's gonna pay for it one way or another. Mark my words. He made a fist with his right hand. Jack Thunder had to smile at that. Storm gremlins and Harlequin gremlins had so much in common. He spoke. Mr. Strombolio, how do you find the guts to do stuff like that? Getting swallowed on purpose like that, I mean. Strombolio turned to Jack Thunder and smiled. This ain't my first rodeo, kid. When you're on the road, you learn how to keep going despite everything. I wasn't going in just out of brashness. I knew that no matter what, I could figure my way out. That's how it works in show business. No matter what, the show must go on. That makes sense. Razor took his place on Jack Thunder's shoulder once more. They trudged on towards the tent. There were no other encounters with corrupted rides. It was fortunate for their enemies, at least. Strombolio was mad enough about the wood dragon. The wendigos would have good sense not to further anger the Dark Champion of Alterus. Not if they didn't want their rumps broken, anyway. A few minutes later, they arrived at the tent. From the outside, not much had changed. It still wore black and purple, but Jack Thunder and Buckthorn knew better. Stormbringer and the Sea Stone glowed and pulsed even faster than their wielders' hearts. They hesitated for a moment before heading inside. Where there was once a sense of wonder and delight inside, there now was a heavy feeling of foreboding. Maybe it had something to do with how hollow and lifeless the air around them felt, and it only seemed to grow more so as they drew near. Finally, they made it to the amphitheater. "Okay, we're here, but where is Lethal Joke?" Buckthorn whispered to Strombolio. She jumped. Even her quiet voice echoed disconcertingly. "Don't worry, I know I left it around here somewhere," Strombolio reassured her. "I just need to remember where I put it." His face dropped. The group let out a collective groan. "Wait, I think I remember something. It was somewhere to the left?" He looked over to his left side. Sure enough, there was a small passageway hidden in the tarp wall. One had to squint to see it, especially in the unnatural darkness that plagued the amphitheater. Jack Thunder made his way towards it. Sure enough, Stormbringer's pulses gained speed as he approached it. He wasn't so sure it was from Lethal Joke. The air fragment still shone its typical green, but there was definitely something important down this way. He motioned for the rest of the team to follow. As soon as they stepped in, the team was blanketed in darkness. Only the light from the 2 anima fragments gave them any sense of where they were. Not that they had any good sense of where they were anyway. The corridor they found themselves in was the same uniform black and purple color scheme the whole way through, and blackened shadow obscured the view up ahead. For all they knew, it could go on forever. All this time, Shadowpaw's ears were pricked, listening for any sign that Nemesis was near. He jumped every time an unexpected noise coursed through the hallway. It was times like these where he suddenly wished that he didn't have such good hearing. But if he did, he could warn the team if someone was sneaking up on them, right? After far too long, he and the rest of the group reached a small room. It looked a lot like Strombolio's trailer back in the woods. It had a desk in one corner, and large makeshift bookshelves filling the walls to their left and right. To the right of the desk was an ornate closet bearing the overturned moon of the Circus of Shadows. Aha! Now I remember. I left it in here. I decided to lock it up for safekeeping. Knowing the wendigos, they wouldn't dare... He stopped as soon as he saw the lock. It wasn't on the door. It had fallen to the floor, rusted and broken. Fearing the worst, he nearly tore the door off its handles as he looked inside. He froze. The rest of the team rushed to look inside. The closet was completely empty. It's gone? Interlude 2. The Greatest Show in Alterus. Strombolio peeked from the shadows. He had done this show so many times before, he thought he would be used to it by now. But being the star of the show never came without its nerves. His ringmaster had seen something special in him. That much was true. But was Strombolio really capable of becoming the shining star that his mentor had seen in him? That wasn't the only thing. There was something off about the crowd tonight. He couldn't pin down just what it was. It was also very cold inside the tent tonight, despite the stage lights being on at full blast. He heard the music start. It could wait. He had a show to put on. Strombolio stepped out onto the stage. The music swelled as the stage lights focused their beams on him. He pulled the trigger on his makeshift fireworks launcher, and streams of colorful dark magic swirled out of it and burst into showers of light. A scream broke him out of his trance. No, many screams. He noticed that several members of the audience were hunched over in pain, averting their eyes and clutching their ears. This had never happened before. Then he remembered. He had overheard his ringmaster discussing it with a few of the other adults in the circus a few weeks ago. Alterus had fallen under a curse. Wendigos attacked the world on a scale no one had ever seen before, and one of the things they despised most was music. They would writhe and wince whenever they heard it. All the color drained from his face. If his hunch was correct, he was in grave danger. He had stumbled into a room full of Wendigo-possessed beings without even knowing it. But the show must go on. The show must always go on. That's what his ringmaster always told him anyway. If the music was hurting them that badly, he had the advantage. Several Wendigos burst from their host's shells and set upon him. A crazed idea entered Strombolio's mind as he glanced down at his creation. He turned the barrel towards one of the Wendigos and fired. It exploded on impact, bursting into a rainbow of sparkles. It hissed and stumbled back. Strombolio caught sight of another Harlequin gremlin near the Calliope. He briefly gave the gremlin a thumbs up before blasting another Wendigo with the magic cannon. The music accelerated and swelled as Strombolio continued to blast the questing Wendigos. They shattered as they were struck, only to pull themselves back together. Even so, their movements slowed as the music in the battle wore them down. The Harlequin gremlin was getting a little worn down himself. This had become a trial of stamina. If he could just last longer than those monsters did, he would win. Just as long as he didn't run out of fireworks in the meantime. He gulped. Two Wendigos gave chase. Strombolio jumped out of the way and straight into one of the posts. Strombolio got an idea. He scrambled to the top of the pole and stood on the platform up top. He'd never used the trapeze equipment before, but he had no time to lose. Grabbing the bar with one hand, he swung down, kicking the Wendigos out of the way. They crashed into piles of boxes as they tumbled through the air. He could hear screams from the audience, both out of fear and out of delight. Indeed, the boxes had shattered upon impact, sending clouds of glittering dust into the air. The Wendigos that crashed into them didn't get back up. The audience's laughter and cheering kept them bound to the ground. The battle went on like this for quite some time. Strombolio swung from the ceiling and landed on the opposite platform. He danced through the air as he continued to blast each Wendigo with the cannon in his free hand. Eventually, with a final burst of light, he revved it up and released a gigantic wave of energy onto the fell beasts, scorching their blackened forms. When the dust cleared, Strombolio could see the remaining Wendigos fleeing towards the horizon. The tent had unfortunately been a victim to the battle. The entire top of it was singed off. But it seemed like no one was badly hurt. Most of the audience members were wise enough to flee the scene when things got ugly. Those who remained only had a few cuts and bruises. "Hey, you there!" Strombolio looked up. Just outside the wall of the tent, he saw three creatures he hadn't seen before. A Tengu wielding a trident staff, a reef siren with a brilliant blue pendant around her neck, and a stone-backed troll wielding an axe that looked to be made out of tree branches and vines. All looked to be around his age. I knew the great Strombolio was quite a performer, but I never expected to see a show like this. Strombolio cleared his throat. Pleasure to meet you. What brings you here?" The Tengu responded. "We're on a quest to save Alterus. I couldn't help but notice how skilled you are with that cannon." The Harlequin gremlin blushed slightly. "Oh, this? I just use this for fireworks shows. And the staff I have here was once just black metal and air crystals. I think we could use your help on our journey." Strombolio couldn't agree more. That night, he enlisted the help of all the other workers in the circus. They, of course, all wanted to help as soon as they heard what he was going to do. They all poured their collective dark magic into the cannon once used for fireworks. Strombolio then reloaded it, but this time with grenades filled with laughing gas. Yes, Strombolio had seen how powerful laughter could be in the battle against the flip-side forces. The grenades were designed to exploit that weakness. He held it aloft. Well, as they say, the show must go on, even if the show's infested with demons. Isn't that right, my lethal joke? The light of the full moon glinted off the barrel of Lethal Joke. It didn't answer, but Strombolio knew it would say yes if it could. Chapter 7. Quiet Like a Cat. Strombolio stared into the closet for a long time. He could have sworn it was here. Where could it have gone? The door slammed open behind him. The team didn't have time to react as wendigos flooded the room. Jack Thunder and Buckthorn drew their anima fragments, but these wendigos were too quick. They struck and held the team fast. Stormbringer and the Sea Stone flew backwards onto the floor behind them, sliding to a stop at the opposite wall. The only one who had managed to get out of the way was Shadowpaws. He ducked into a dark corner of the room where the wendigos couldn't reach. He could only watch in horror at what happened next. Like a receding wave, the wendigos drew back out of the room, dragging the rest of the team with them. Outside the door, Shadowpaws could hear the voice of Nemesis, the being that he and Strombolio thought they could trust. Good work. Without the Fragments of Anima, these interlopers stand no chance against us. Those fools back from the Turquoise Archipelago could learn a thing or two from you. Well, that sealed it. Nemesis was working with the wendigos. Probably was the reason Lethal Joke went missing too. Shadowpaws crept out of his hiding place, picking up the discarded staff and pendant. Thank Anima that those monsters hadn't managed to get those too. Now he just needed to find Strombolio and the others without being caught. Shadowpaws crept around on little cat feet, which was appropriate since he was a cat. He held Stormbringer close to his body, trying to keep it out of sight. Not an easy task, seeing how it was twice as big as he was. The Sea Stone was a bit easier to handle. He just wore it around his neck. Both fragments pulsed frantically, threatening to give his position away. Despite their bright glow, Shadowpaws could hardly see 2 feet in front of him in the gloom. His Nekomata eyesight was of little help in this unnatural darkness. Not even his incredible ears did him any good. He couldn't even hear a pin drop. Eventually, he made his way to the end of the corridor. He was back in the amphitheater. Even in here it was eerily silent. He looked around for any sign of Strombolio and the others. As much as he wanted to call out for them, he couldn't give away his position. Finally, he spotted them. They were still glued in place, just now in the center of the stage. Frosti and Strombolio were stuck like flies to one of the poles the trapeze platform hung from. Jack Thunder, Buckthorn, and Son were fastened to the other pole on the other end of the stage. Razor was stuck to the ground nearby, hissing and spitting at Nemesis. "I already told you I haven't seen it." Strombolio's defiant voice broke the silence. "Enough with the lies. I know who you are. You are the Dark Champion of Alterus, the one Harlequin gremlin that ever managed to slow us down. I know you have the Dark Fragment around here somewhere. Now where is it?" So Nemesis didn't take it then. Shadowpaws' shoulders relaxed, if only slightly. But then, where would it be? He noticed Stormbringer and the Sea Stone pulsing again. This time they glowed purple. Before Shadowpaws could ponder what this meant, he remembered something that Strombolio had once said about the anima fragments. Something about how they could sense each other's presence. Yeah, that's what he'd said. Because he was talking about how Lethal Joke had helped him find Stormbringer again when the Wendigos knocked it out of San's hand. Now it seems it's time for Stormbringer to return the favor. Shadowpaws encircled the perimeter of the stage at a distance. As he crept forward, the staff's pulses gained speed. He was getting warmer. Nemesis, for its part, wasn't paying attention. It was too focused on its captured quarry. Strombolio, on the other hand, had very much noticed Shadowpaws' presence. He met its gaze with the Nekomata for a split second. His head moved back into position, but Shadowpaws could see that the Harlequin gremlin was still tracking him with his eyes. Eventually, Shadowpaws came across a stack of crates against the back wall. Both Stormbringer and the Sea Stone glowed with an intensity that would have brightened the whole room if it hadn't been for the Wendigo's draining influence. Shadowpaws heard Nemesis continue to interrogate Strombolio as he rooted through the boxes one by one. With every box emptied, the anima fragment's pulses grew stronger. Empty boxes and their contents littered in a precarious pile behind him, Shadowpaws opened up the last crate. It was a bit bigger and longer than the others. Stormbringer glowed bright white, as if to say, "Yes, this is the one." When he lifted the lid, he was met with a bright violet glow. He couldn't believe his eyes. A massive bazooka painted in pink and purple met his eyes. A glaring smiley face was emblazoned on its side. Lethal Joke had been in here all along. Suddenly, the mountain of empty boxes shook and collapsed. Nemesis turned around at the crashing sound. Shadowpaws froze as Nemesis met eyes with him. He had been caught. "Get him!" Shadowpaws grabbed the dark fragment out of the box. He pulled the trigger again and again, launching laughing gas grenades left and right. In his terror, he couldn't even aim straight. The monsters closed in on him even as the gas slowed them down. Shadowpaws dashed away as a black claw scratched his leg. He carried Stormbringer in one hand and Lethal Joke in the other as he made his way to the stage. In their haste to capture him, the Wendigos had abandoned their former charges. The team was free from the bonds of the Wendigo substance. Shadowpaws just needed to get the other two fragments to their wielders. He tripped and fell on the last step to the stage, sending the fragments sliding. The Wendigos dive-bombed at them, but Jack Thunder and Buckthorn managed to grab Stormbringer and the Sea Stone before the Wendigos could snatch them. A few bolts of lightning from Stormbringer forced them back into the air. "Impudent cat boy. I should have known you would betray me." Shadowpaws raised his head to look at Nemesis. What he saw filled him with abject terror. Nemesis's form was completely black, the same as the Wendigo's. Its head looked to be a goat skull with vicious fangs. Its blood-red eyes, glowing with malice and hatred, narrowed. Nemesis wasn't working with the Wendigos. It was one of them. "It's of no matter now. You still can't defeat all of us at the same time. Your fragments are as good as ours." Jack Thunder leapt between Nemesis and Shadowpaws. He stared defiantly up at the Wendigo. "You in what army, ugly?" he taunted, brandishing his staff. All of a sudden, the entire amphitheater lit up. Shadowpaws bolted to his feet. Filling the seats were row after row of the carnival's attendants. Each one stared towards them with a blank expression and black slime running from their mouths. Above their pale forms, uncountable Wendigos circled the stage like vultures. The color drained from Jack Thunder's face. Oh, that army. Chapter 8 Comedy and Tragedy. All Shadowpaws could do was look up in horror. He never imagined that there would be this many wendigos in one place. Certainly not in the Circus of Shadows. He clutched onto Lethal Joke for dear life. A bead of sweat dripped down his brow. Even with the 3 anima fragments in hand, the team was vastly outnumbered. There was no telling that any of them would get out alive. Strombolio would know what to do, but he was nowhere to be seen. Had he fled? No. The Dark Champion wouldn't have done that. He'd faced off against the Heart of Darkness himself. This should have been no problem for him. But then, where had he gone? He couldn't see Nemesis either. A chill ran down the Nekomata's spine as another thought came to mind. Did Nemesis take him when we weren't looking? The wendigos suddenly swooped down onto the team. The anima fragments coursed with energy as the 3 braced themselves. But just before impact, Shadowpaws could hear a faint noise. It sounded like someone playing a disjointed melody on the calliope. The questing shadow demons lost all sense of direction, crashing to the ground below. Shadowpaws turned to the source of the noise. There he had his answer. Jack Thunder's little pet wyvern, Razor, was dancing across the keys of the circus's calliope. Beside him on the bench was Strombolio. The Dark Champion hadn't been taken at all. He winked at Shadowpaws. I always say, the show must go on. The show must go on. Wait, I've got an idea. Shadowpaws revved up Lethal Joke and took careful aim. He fired not at the wendigos on the ground, but at the base of the seats surrounding the stage. The grenades exploded in a shower of hot pink sparks and greenish gas. The gas floated up to the stands. All of a sudden, the drained fairies began to stir. A faint laughter filled the air as the gas traveled upwards, blanketing every level of the stands. Shadowpaws covered his ears as every wendigo in the tent shrieked at the same time. Through his agony, he could finally see Nemesis. The superior wendigo was doubled over in pain, looking as if it were about to throw up. The Nekomata looked back over at Strombolio, who nodded and gave him a thumbs up. The music in the room swelled as he and Razor played a different song, this one much faster and louder than before. Now Shadowpaws understood. There was a reason why Strombolio used laughing gas. Music, laughter, things that were the opposite of despair. Things that wendigos couldn't stand a single second of. These things were the key to ending this madness once and for all. The Nekomata fired another round of grenades at the stands. They exploded all around, filling the amphitheater with gas. The team couldn't see anything, but they could tell what was happening. The increasingly raucous laughter and the calliope competed with each other to be heard. Shadowpaws' ears were glued to his head as his eyes darted around for any signs of Nemesis. All around him, Nemesis's wendigo minions rose unsteadily, throwing themselves at the team. One crashed just inches away from him before emerald lightning struck it, coursing through its blackened body. A frosty wind blew another out of the sky, throwing it against the tent wall. It slumped to the floor, encased in a tomb of ice. The team picked off the wendigos one by one. Shadowpaws could see Jack Thunder and Buckthorn riding around to top an airborne wave of seawater. The electricity coursing through it held it aloft, as the 2 dove and swooped around the wendigos. Buckthorn concentrated on guiding the wave through the air, while Jack Thunder shot lightning bolts at the wendigos from every angle. No matter how fast they were, the 2 fairies were even faster. They looped impossible knots around the wendigos as the flying demons struggled to keep up. On the ground, Frosti and San worked together to create a heavy, chilling wind in the tent. Shadowpaws dug his claws into the ground to keep from being blown away. He was surprised that the entire tent wasn't ripped off its foundations. With the laughing gas blown away, though, he could see that the audience was no longer possessed. Their colors had been restored, and they seemed to be enjoying the performance, laughing and shouting as Nemesis's minions were blown off course and crashed into the walls. Shadowpaws got another idea. The trapeze! He clambered his way up to the top of the trapeze pole. Grabbing hold of the handlebar with his free hand, he swung through the air with the kind of grace only a cat like him could have. He took his place at Jack Thunder and Buckthorn's side, blasting Wendigo after Wendigo with lethal joke. Sparks and smoke of all colors rained down from the ceiling as each Wendigo fell to the ground, never to get up again. Suddenly, his hand slipped. An icy ramp burst out of the center of the stage, spiraling downwards. He slid all the way to the bottom, landing on his feet. "Thanks, Frosti!" That's when he felt a thud on the ground behind him. Turning around, he saw Nemesis. The once composed Wendigo was shaking, absolutely livid that he and his friends would dare to defy it. He stepped back. That's when he felt something vibrate in his hand. Looking down, he saw Lethal Joke. Only now, it faintly glowed white, a rainbow aura surrounding its form. Chapter 9. Laughter Conquers All. Time seemed to slow down as Nemesis closed in on Shadowpaws one step at a time. All the other Wendigos lay motionless on the ground. It was just him and the Wendigo General. The vibrations of Lethal Choke in his hands gave him the courage to stand his ground, even as Nemesis approached. With every step, the glow coming from the dark fragment grew brighter. Nemesis came to a complete stop as the light emanating from Lethal Joke filled the tent. It doubled over once more, gaping up at Shadowpaws. "What? What is the meaning of this?" "Lethal Joke doesn't like you. That's the meaning of this." Jack Thunder jumped into the action, zapping Nemesis in the chest. The Wendigo shouted as it fell onto its back. It snarled, propping itself up onto its elbows. It shook and swayed uncontrollably as it tried to get back to its feet. Its eyes moved in and out of focus. Still, it managed to get itself into a crouching position. You... Jack Thunder pointed Stormbringer directly at Nemesis. Shadowpaws saw that the staff was glowing white too. In fact, so was the sea stone, cinched around Buckthorn's neck as she appeared at his left side. The 3 anima fragments pulsed in time to the music and each other. The wind and music inside the tent came to a complete stop. Everyone, from the audience to Frosti and San to Razor and Strombolio, stared in awe at the incredible power resonating from the 3 anima fragments. Not even the other Wendigos stirred. They were too worn down from the battle to move. Nemesis shuffled back, now terrified of the artifacts the 3 young heroes wielded. Even without the music, the level of undifferentiated anima in this room was off the charts. That was why the fragments were resonating, and it was why Nemesis and its minions were too weak to get off the ground. It stared in horror. It knew exactly what came next. And the 3 heroes knew it too. They closed their eyes and took a deep breath. They each aimed their fragments directly at Nemesis, and they began to recite the incantation. "Back to the flip side with you and your hate," Jack Thunder began. Stormbringer coursed with electricity. "You have no place in this land of dreams." Buckthorn recited the second line. The sea stone shimmered like the sea, shades of blue and green flowing through it like currents in a stream. Shadowpaws knew the next part. "We belong to Alterus. Alterus is ours." Silvery clouds of magic snaked around Lethal Joke as its glow grew brighter. Now be gone! Shadowpaws squinted as the glow from the fragments grew painfully bright, bright enough to chase away every single shadow from the circus of shadows. He staggered his stance as Lethal Joke's recoil threatened to bowl him over. Through the magical Armageddon, he could see a beam of 6 colors emerging from the barrel of the dark fragment. Stormbringer and the Sea Stone fired similar beams, which merged in the center before rocketing straight towards Nemesis. The Wendigo General fired a beam of no magic at it, to no avail. The light-sucking beam of energy was no match for the sheer power of undifferentiated anima. The spectral beam scarcely touched it before it shattered and disintegrated into nothingness. Nemesis made one last-ditch attempt to run. It scrambled to its feet, making it only a few steps before the rainbow struck it in the shoulder. Shadowpaws could see the Wendigo's lightless form disintegrating before his eyes. Starting where the beam hit and moving outward, Nemesis's form fractured and burned away like wood in a fire pit. The rainbow fragmented and split into many beams, each of which homed in on the Wendigos on the floor. Shadowpaws could hardly hear the echoing shrieks of Wendigos being stripped of their power over the blast of anima from all 3 fragments at once. Each and every one of them was reduced to piles of black ashes, the same as Nemesis. The beams circled back and merged once more, carrying all the black ashes with them. The blinding light faded as the rainbow energy rocketed out of a hole torn in the top of the tent. Through the hole, Shadowpaw saw the beam racing upwards towards the night sky. A small explosion far overhead jolted the building as it made its way through the flipside rift, sealing it once and for all. It took some time for Shadowpaws to get his senses back. To his relief, the inside of the circus tent was dark once again, in contrast to the stark white that had filled the entire circus tent just a few seconds ago. All manner of colors and shapes danced before his eyes. They all fell into place as his legs trembled with exhaustion. "Hey, are you alright? You don't look so good all of a sudden." Shadowpaws looked over to Jack Thunder. The Nekomata caught his breath and nodded. "Yeah, I think so. As long as the blast didn't blind me." All of a sudden, the stage lights once again flared to life. A roar of applause filled the room. The 3 froze for a second before awkwardly waving back to the crowd. Strombolio clambered up to the stage with Razor on his shoulder. "Ha-ha! You did it! That was the greatest show I've ever seen!" Strombolio exclaimed. Razor squealed in agreement. Shadowpaws smiled. "Oh man, it was nothing. I couldn't have done it without you 2. He turned towards Jack Thunder and Buckthorn. "What? We weren't important?" Frosti appeared at Jack Thunder's side, smirking. San followed behind with a relieved expression. Oh yeah, and you too," Shadowpaws corrected himself. "Relax, kiddo. I was just joking." There was only one thing left to do now. Each one of them turned towards the crowd. One by one, Jack Thunder, Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Strombolio, Frosti, San, and Razor took a bow. Listening to the crowd's cheers, they knew that this night in the Dark Carnival would be remembered as one of the best and brightest in Altarian history. Chapter 10. The After Party. Jack Thunder sighed in relief. He thought they would never let him leave. After he and his team took their final bow, the crowds had completely mobbed them, trying to get their autographs. Strombolio, of course, was more than happy to oblige, but the Storm Gremlin didn't really like it too much. Poor Shadowpaws liked it even less. The Nekomata looked like he was about to start hissing and spitting back there. But now, they could all rest on the hill overlooking the Dark Carnival, away from all the excitement. He inhaled the aroma of earth and ozone. Above his head, innumerable stars twinkled like diamonds. A slight breeze kicked up, loosening some leaves from tree branches. They danced around the storm gremlin and his crew before settling on the ground. He was so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice Strombolio walking up the hill until the latter sat right beside him. The Harlequin gremlin sighed deeply, taking in the autumn night air. Neither of them spoke for the longest time. Both were quite exhausted after their battle. Finally, Jack Thunder broke the silence. "Hey, that was some show we had back there, wasn't it? Even though the wendigos kinda ruined everything." The older gremlin turned to him. "Don't worry about it. I'm used to things going wrong during shows. Even I've had more than a few rotten tomatoes thrown at me in my day. You kind of just learn to roll with the punches. And like you said, the show must go on," Shadowpaws finished. Strombolio nodded. "You got it." Jack Thunder looked over and noticed a bottle in Strombolio's hand. It was wide and opaque, and it had a familiar-looking label on it. He took a swig from it. "Amberjack cider? Isn't that the stuff that makes you all weird and giggly?" Strombolio stopped in his tracks. He should have known Jack Thunder would say something. It's nothing. It's just something I use to relax." Shadowpaws sighed. He knew where this was going. He and the other Harlequin gremlins and Nekomata that worked for the Circus of Shadows had been finding more and more empty bottles of the stuff in Strombolio's trailer. The elder Harlequin gremlin's reply to Jack Thunder was the same one he threw out all the time. Shadowpaws knew his boss was doing his best to keep a smile despite all he'd been through. The Nekomata just wished he wouldn't force himself to feel happy. "Strombolio, can we talk in private?" San stood a fair distance from the rest of the group, leaning against a tall black pine tree. Sure. Just wait here, okay?" Strombolio motioned for Shadowpaws to stay where he was. He watched as San and Strombolio disappeared into the trees just a few feet away. So what's up?" Strombolio looked back to see if the kids were listening. "You know exactly what's up, Strombolio. What were you doing with that bottle over there? Look, I've had a long day. I just need something to help with my nerves." San's eyes narrowed. "Why do I feel like you're not telling me the whole truth? Why did Shadowpaws get that look when he saw that bottle in your hands?" Strombolio's face flushed. Did he really want to tell San the truth? San sighed. "Look, Strombolio, the war was hard on all of us. I spent 11 years in the Razor Frost range because I didn't want to face the world again. It was only because I went looking for Stormbringer again that I left that infernal place and met Jack. I know that the war changed my view on a lot of things for the worse, but I've been doing better, all because I took that chance. So why are you lying to me?" Strombolio's gaze dropped to the ground. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. San swore he could see tears falling from Strombolio's eyes. Finally, the Harlequin gremlin let out a long sigh. "I just can't let them know I'm not happy." He sniffed and wiped his eyes with his arm. San cocked his head. "San, my entire career is about bringing laughter and smiles to Alterus. I mean, you saw yourself how important it is if this world is going to stand against the heart of darkness. What would happen if I were to stop smiling? All of Alterus might stop smiling too. Then what would we do? There would be no one left to stop." San put his hand on Strombolio's shoulder. "I think you're carrying too much responsibility for all of this. The fate of Alterus doesn't rest solely on your shoulders. Even in the war, it took all of us to defeat the heart of darkness. And we're still behind you. I'm still behind you." Strombolio paused. "You're right. And those kids, they've got each other too. Shadowpaws, he's the best one I know to wield lethal joke. I know he can do it. especially after today," he finished. San grabbed hold of Strombolio's face and turned his head to face his own. "Please promise me that you'll tell me if you're feeling bad. We all want to help you. You just need to let us." "I'll try." Shadowpaws watched the woods intently. San and Strombolio must have walked a fair distance away. He couldn't hear them at all, and he could hear a lot of things. He jumped in surprise when he heard a branch snap. Right on cue, the two emerged from the foliage. "Don't worry, Shadowpaws. I'm alright. San here just had to set me straight is all," Strombolio reassured. "Mr. Strombolio, what was going on back there? Are you in trouble?" Buckthorn asked. "No, I'm not in trouble. San and I just had a little talk." Strombolio set his bottle of cider back on the ground. He turned towards Shadowpaws. "Shadowpaws, I want you to join these two on their quest." He motioned to Jack Thunder and Buckthorn. "Me? But—" "I insist. I need to stay in the Circus of Shadows. Anima knows Alterus needs all the laughter it can get. But I bet you already know that." Shadowpaws smirked. How could he not at this point? "You'll be alright. It wasn't an accident that you faced that demon down. You really showed all of them wendigos who's boss." Strombolio's voice trembled. He still smiled, chuckling a little despite himself. "Yeah, and we're happy to have you on the team," Jack Thunder exclaimed. The rest of the team nodded in agreement. Shadowpaws looked down at Lethal Joke. The dark fragment shimmered with a deep violet light. He smiled uneasily. "Guess I can't really say no." Chapter 11. Welcome Aboard. "So I guess now that you're staying with us, I can show you around Tempest Island." Before Shadowpaws could protest, Jack Thunder waved Stormbringer in the air. The next thing he knew, he was flying through the night sky on a massive storm cloud behind the storm gremlin. The Nekomata could see an imposing mountain in the distance, wrapped in massive storm clouds. Only a few minutes later, they touched down on the cliff edge of the floating continent that Jack Thunder called home. It was quite a sight. Shadowpaws, not being an air elemental, had seen the storm gremlin's numerous flying continents in the sky before, but he had never actually been to one. He'd always thought Tempest Island would be a barren, rocky plain, much like the rocks on Mount Tempest. But the lowlands were surprisingly green, covered in hardy grass and populated with sharp-leaved trees. Even the weather on Tempest Island was on its best behavior. Only a few faint rumbles of thunder and a light sprinkle of rain made their presence known. Nothing like the monstrous storms the island tended to bring with it whenever it visited the circus's caravan. "The village isn't far from here. Come on!" The Nekomata ran after Jack Thunder and Buckthorn as they made their way inland. Sure enough, he soon came upon a clearing dotted with many stone huts. "Don't worry, they're much bigger on the inside. Now where—" "Oh, there it is!" Jack Thunder exclaimed as he found what he was looking for in the dim light. He ran over to the door on one of the huts and pushed it open, holding it for Shadowpaws and Buckthorn to come in. One by one, the team filed into the stone building, Jack Thunder shutting the door behind them. "All right, Jackie, I think you know what to do from here. Me and San are going to bed. We'll see you in the morning." Frosti and San disappeared down the hallway connecting to the front room. Not that Shadowpaws could blame them. It had been quite a day for all of them, and it wasn't going to get any less hectic from here. "Oh, now that we're all together, I guess I should show you my room, Shadowpaws. We're all going to be staying there for the night." "What? Are you serious?" "Yeah, Mr. San is already staying in the guest room. Besides, it's no trouble for me. Now come on." Buckthorn and Shadowpaws exchanged worried glances. They were really all going to sleep in the same room? It's only for one night, they reassured themselves. They made their way down the hall. And this here is my room. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's mine. Shadowpaws looked around. It was simple, yes, but it was no motel room either. Numerous posters of comic book characters adorned the walls. One poster in particular caught his attention. Opposite the bed, a poster bearing the image of a storm gremlin in a scarlet jumpsuit adorned the wall. The gremlin had black boots and gloves, and on his chest was a black badge bearing the image of a golden yellow buzzsaw blade with 6 teeth. The gremlin stared back with a smug expression, and underneath him was the name Razor, written in sickle-shaped bronze letters. So that's why Jack named his wyvern Razor. Right on cue, Razor ran into the room from behind Shadowpaws and jumped on Jack Thunder's bed. He circled around before planting himself in the center of the sheets. This kind of reminds me of my old home back in the Great Barrier Kingdom, Buckthorn told the Storm Gremlin. I have a bunch of old posters up on my walls, too. So do I, Shadowpaws added, though they're mostly just from the Circus of Shadows. Got some other stuff too, though. He pointed up to the Razor poster. Who's that up on the wall? Ah, that's Razor. He's a character in one of my comic books. He was kinda my idol when I was little, he chuckled. But I named this one after him. He gestured towards the little purple wyvern on his bed. The latter was already sound asleep. I guess I can see why. Shadowpaws yawned. It's getting late. We'd better settle down for the night. Yeah, goodness knows we need it after that, Buckthorn agreed. But where will we sleep? I've got a couple of sleeping bags under my bed if you want, Jack Thunder offered. That was all right with them. It wasn't much, but it would work. Buckthorn and Shadowpaws got themselves settled in when Jack Thunder turned out the light. Shadowpaws lay awake as Jack Thunder and Buckthorn fell asleep. Tired as he was, he couldn't stop his mind from racing. He thought about how Nemesis almost took over the Dark Carnival. He would have never known the carnival was in danger if he hadn't met the 2 fairies sleeping beside him right now. What would have happened if they never showed up? Not even the Dark Champion of Alterus had sensed anything strange when he first ran into Nemesis. Benekamata shuddered. Those wendigos were getting better and better at hiding themselves. They had learned well since their last clash with Alterus. Shadowpaws shuffled out of his sleeping bag and tiptoed to the window. He watched the rain fall from the sky as flashes of lightning illuminated Mount Tempest in the distance. His heartbeat jolted with every clash of thunder that rang in his ears. He didn't know how Jack Thunder slept through it every night. I guess when you've been listening to it all your life. Hey, you alright? Shadowpaws jumped and turned around. Jack Thunder sat up in his bed and stared blearily at him. Yeah, just a long day. Jack Thunder laid back down and closed his eyes. Shadowpaws turned to the window once more. He seemed to be doing all right, snoozing away with not a care in the world. How could he do it, Shadowpaws wondered. How could he just go to sleep like he wasn't going to face the fate of the world the very next day? A lime-hued lightning bolt flashed just beyond Mount Tempest. Shadowpaws remembered the green lightning bolts Jack Thunder had dished out in the battle with Nemesis. Well, I guess if he can get used to the thunder, I can too. Shadowpaws crept back to his sleeping bag. He zipped it up and shut his eyes. As sleep overtook him, he hoped with all his might he wasn't just lying to himself. Chapter 12. Lying in Wait. Nemesis lay on the barren ground of the flip side. It didn't want to open its eyes to its surroundings. It had all been so perfect. Nemesis had deceived the Dark Champion of Alterus himself, something even the Heart of Darkness wasn't able to do. Its minions had infiltrated the entire carnival. The carnival was in the palm of its clawed hand. But then those kids... how could it be possible? The cat boy ran with the fragments, they started glowing, and Nemesis somehow ended up on the losing side. The fragments. There was something special about the fragments that Nemesis had obviously underestimated. They weren't so powerful on their own, but when they were close to each other, neither Nemesis nor any other Wendigo could even come close to them. They must draw their power from each other's presence. If Nemesis had any hope of overcoming the fragments, it would have to separate those kids from one another. But how? That storm gremlin, he seemed to be the leader of the bunch. Maybe if Nemesis got to him and froze his heart, the rest of the team would lose faith and break up. But what if his heart was too pure to turn to stone? How was Nemesis supposed to corrupt him when there was nothing about him to corrupt? Nemesis grimaced. This was not going to be an easy task. It concentrated, opening a viewing window into Alterus. Where were those kids now? The view centered on Jack Thunder's room. All three of them were asleep. Jack Thunder slept on the bed with his wyvern, while the others slept on the floor in sleeping bags. Not much to see in there. Okay, where were they headed now? Nemesis's view changed to one of the ground underneath Tempest Island. Through the darkness of the night sky, it could see a curtain of trees in the distance. This was the Emerald Woodland. So the winds had changed direction, and now Tempest Island was heading inland? Nemesis took a closer look. Not much except more trees with fiery leaves turned maroon in the dim. But it sensed something deep within these woods. Something incredibly powerful. Its view once again changed. Now it was focused on Yggdrasil, the ancient dryad and legendary world tree who nurtured the Emerald Woodland and took care of all its denizens. Immediately, Nemesis knew with its magic-sniffing sense that there was a powerful source of earth magic resting near Yggdrasil's roots. It thought back to the War of the Wendigos. The Earth Champion's fragment, an axe called Terra, was supposedly formed from the twisted branches of Yggdrasil. When the fragments were scattered across Alterus in the final battle, did Terra somehow end up returning to Yggdrasil? The Wendigo General's black heart sank. This was not good. Yggdrasil's kind and loving nature had turned her heart into an enormous and powerful Wendigo ward. The Heartwood, as it was called, repelled even the strongest Wendigos from making their way into the forest village that surrounded her. Just the thought of going near the Heartwood made the greater Wendigo's skin crawl. Nemesis shook its head. What was it thinking? It was a Wendigo. It just had to sneak its way into the village, that's all. Once it drained some of the villagers, the power from the Heartwood would grow weak enough that it could walk about with little issue. Then it could focus on drawing Jack Thunder away from the rest of the team and dealing with him once and for all. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was Nemesis's only plan. It rested back on its laurels. It could only lie in wait. Soon, some short-sighted fairy would accidentally open a rift between Alterus and the flip side. But for now, the Wendigo General would bide its time. It could wait. It could wait as long as it needed to. It had all the time in the world now. Hi there, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like more from our friend Jack Thunder, you can check out my new book series, Jack Thunder and the Fragments of Anima, on Amazon using the link in the description. Or you can head on over to my Teespring and grab a few things from my shop. And please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more content every week. Thank you for watching.